The mail-order bride arrived at midnight in a blizzard, clutching a letter that would destroy everything she thought she knew about love. The wind howled across the Wyoming territory like the voice of something ancient and angry, hurling snow against the windows of the stagecoach with relentless fury. Inside, Elena Hayes pressed her gloved hands against the frosted glass, watching the white wilderness swallow the world whole. Her breath fogged the window as she whispered a prayer she'd repeated 1,000 times since leaving Kansas City. Please, God, let this be the right choice. The letter in her coat pocket crinkled as she shifted, worn soft from countless readings. Copper Creek Ranch, seeking a wife of good character and strong constitution. Marriage arrangement through Missouri Matrimonial Services. Come prepared for frontier life. Samuel Garrett. At 28, Elena had thought her chance at marriage had passed like smoke on the wind. The war had taken so much from her nursing years in those blood-soaked hospitals, the explosion that had left her barren, the dreams of children she would never hold. But Samuel Garrett's letter had been different, kind, hopeful. He'd written of needing companionship more than youth, understanding more than perfection. The stagecoach lurched violently to one side, throwing Elena against the window. Through the storm, she glimpsed the driver wrestling with the reins, his coat already white with snow. "Can't go much further, miss," he shouted over the wind. "Storm's getting worse by the minute." Elena's heart hammered. "How much further to Copper Creek Ranch?" "Should be just over that ridge. But if we don't find shelter soon, we'll all freeze out here." The horses whinnied in distress as the wind caught the coach again. Elena clutched the letter tighter, feeling the weight of everything she'd left behind. The small room in Kansas City, the job at the textile mill, the loneliness that had eaten at her like a slow poison. There was no going back now. Whatever waited at Copper Creek Ranch, it had to be better than the hollow existence she'd abandoned. Through the screaming wind, a flicker of light appeared in the distance. Warm, golden, real. "There!" Elena pressed against the window. "I see a light!" The driver guided the struggling horses toward the beacon, and slowly a ranch house materialized from the storm. It was larger than Elena had imagined, built of dark timber and native stone, with smoke curling from the chimney like a promise of warmth. Light glowed in several windows, casting amber rectangles across the snow-covered yard. The stagecoach shuddered to a stop near the front porch. Elena gathered her small carpet bag and the leather satchel containing everything she owned. Her nursing supplies, her mother's Bible, and 2 simple dresses that would have to suffice for a new life. "This is it, miss," the driver called, already working to unhitch the exhausted horses. "I'll need to shelter these animals in that barn before they drop." Elena stepped down into knee-deep snow, the cold hitting her like a physical blow. The wind tore at her wool coat and tried to rip the bonnet from her head. She stumbled toward the porch, each step a battle against the storm's fury. Before she could knock, the heavy door swung open. A man filled the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that caught the lamplight behind him. But his eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they held a hardness that made Elena's breath catch. This wasn't the face she'd expected from those gentle letters. "You're not Samuel Garrett," she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. "No, I'm not." His voice was deep, rough around the edges like he didn't use it often. "Name's Jake Morrison, and you're standing in a blizzard that could kill you." He stepped aside and Elena stumbled into warmth that hit her like a wall. The ranch house was comfortable but lived in. Leather furniture worn smooth, a stone fireplace crackling with split wood, walls lined with rifles and riding gear. But there was something else, something that made the hair on her neck stand up. A woman's shawl draped over a chair, a piano in the corner with sheet music still open, photographs on the mantel, their faces turned away from the light. "I'm looking for Samuel Garrett of Copper Creek Ranch," Elena managed, water dripping from her clothes onto the wooden floor. "I'm Elena Hayes. He's expecting me." Jake Morrison's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, this is Morrison Ranch. Been in my family for 15 years. Never heard of any Samuel Garrett, and there's no Copper Creek Ranch anywhere in this territory." The words hit Elena harder than the cold had. That's impossible. The letter came through the matrimonial service. The directions were very specific." She fumbled for the envelope with trembling fingers. See? It says Copper Creek Ranch, Wyoming Territory. Jake took the letter, his expression growing darker as he read. This is my address, all right, but someone's been using a false name. He looked up at her, and for a moment, something like pity flickered in those storm-gray eyes. Ma'am, you've been deceived. There's no Samuel Garrett, no Copper Creek Ranch, and no one here expecting a bride. The room tilted around Elena. All her savings spent on the journey, her job gone, her few possessions sold to pay for this trip to nowhere. She was stranded in a blizzard, 1,000 miles from anything resembling home, at the mercy of a stranger who looked like he'd rather face a pack of wolves than deal with a lost mail-order bride. She began, then stopped. What was there to say? Jake Morrison studied her for a long moment, taking in her soaked coat, her pale face, the way her hands shook with something deeper than cold. Storm's not letting up tonight. You can stay until it passes, then I'll take you back to town. Before Elena could respond, a sound drifted from the shadows near the stairs. Software hesitant, footsteps. A little girl emerged from the darkness, maybe 5 years old with hair like corn silk and eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. She wore a white nightgown that seemed to glow in the firelight, and she moved with the careful silence of someone who'd learned to make herself invisible. The moment the child saw Elena, she stopped. Her small mouth fell open, and her eyes went wide with something between wonder and recognition. Jake turned, his entire demeanor changing. Sarah, sweetheart, go back to bed. This lady is just... But the little girl didn't listen. She walked straight to Elena, reached out with tiny fingers, and gently touched the wet fabric of her coat. Then in a voice so soft it was barely a whisper, so sweet it made Elena's heart crack wide open, she said the words that would change everything. God finally sent you to us. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake Morrison went rigid, his face white as the snow outside. His eyes fixed on his daughter with an expression of pure shock. She hasn't spoken, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Not a word, not since... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Elena knelt down until she was eye level with the child. Hello, sweetheart, she said gently. My name is Elena. Sarah looked up at her with those impossibly blue eyes and smiled. A tiny, fragile thing, but real. Are you going to stay with us? But what Elena didn't know was that the man who reluctantly let her stay was hiding a secret that could destroy them all. Because 3 years ago, on a night very much like this one, his wife had disappeared. And when Jake Morrison woke up the next morning, her blood was on his hands. The silence stretched between them like a held breath, broken only by the wind rattling the windows in the soft crackle of the fire. Jake Morrison stared at his daughter as if seeing a ghost, his face a battlefield of emotions. Shock, hope, fear, and something deeper that Elena couldn't name. Sarah tugged gently at Elena's wet coat, her small fingers surprisingly strong. You're cold, she whispered, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Papa, she's cold. Jake startled as if waking from a trance. Yes, of course. He cleared his throat, running a hand through his dark hair. Miss Hayes, you need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia. Sarah, go get a blanket from the cedar chest. But Sarah didn't move. Her blue eyes remained fixed on Elena with an intensity that was both touching and unsettling. I knew you'd come, she said, so quietly Elena had to lean forward to hear. I drew you in my pictures. Mama said you'd come when we needed you most. Jake's face went ashen. Sarah, your mama... I know Mama's in heaven, Sarah interrupted, her voice matter-of-fact in the way only children could manage. But she told me in my dreams. She said a lady with kind eyes would come in the snow and she'd help us not be so lonely anymore. Elena's heart clenched. She looked up at Jake, seeing the raw pain that flickered across his features before he shuddered it away. Whatever had happened to his wife, the wound was still fresh, still bleeding. Let me help you with your coat, Jake said gruffly, stepping forward. His hands were gentle as he helped Elena out of the sodden wool, but she noticed how he avoided her eyes. I'll hang this by the fire to dry. As he took her coat, his fingers brushed hers for just a moment. They were calloused, warm, and steady, the hands of a man who worked the land and knew its moods. But there was a tremor in them, barely perceptible, that spoke of nerves stretched thin. The ranch house was larger than it had appeared from outside, with high-beam ceilings and windows that would offer spectacular views in daylight. A woman's touch was evident everywhere, in the embroidered cushions on the chairs, the carefully arranged wildflowers dried and displayed in mason jars, the way the furniture was positioned to create intimate conversation spaces. But dust had settled on many surfaces, and there was an air of neglect that spoke of a house without its heart. "You must be wondering what kind of man lets his ranch get used for mail fraud," Jake said, hanging Elena's coat on a peg near the fireplace. His voice was bitter. "Truth is, I have no idea how someone got my address or why they'd use it to lure unsuspecting women out here." Elena sank into the chair he indicated, a leather armchair that was probably his usual spot. It bore the impression of long use. "The matrimonial service seemed legitimate," she said. "I corresponded with Samuel Garrett for 3 months. His letters they were kind, thoughtful." "What did he tell you about himself?" Elena hesitated, suddenly feeling foolish. "He said he was a widower with a young daughter, that he needed a wife who understood that some men carry scars, and that he wasn't looking for passion so much as partnership." She touched the pocket where she'd kept his letters. "He wrote about loneliness like he really understood it." Jake's jaw tightened. "Sounds like someone did their research. That's ... He stopped, glancing at Sarah, who had curled up on the rug near Elena's feet like a faithful dog. "That's not far from the truth." "Papa doesn't laugh anymore," Sarah said, looking up at Elena with those impossibly blue eyes. "Not since Mama went to heaven. But you're going to make him laugh again, aren't you?" The hope in the child's voice was like a knife to Elena's chest. "Sweetheart, I'm not sure I can—" "You can," Sarah interrupted with the absolute certainty of childhood. "I can tell. You have laugh lines around your eyes, see? Like Mama did." Elena caught Jake watching her, his expression unreadable. The moment stretched, loaded with possibilities and dangers, before he broke it by clearing his throat. "You must be hungry. I'll put some coffee on, maybe heat up some stew." He paused at the kitchen doorway. "Sarah, show Miss Hayes around while I'm cooking, but don't go upstairs." As soon as he disappeared into the kitchen, Sarah scrambled to her feet and took Elena's hand. "Come see my drawings," she said, pulling her toward a low table near the window. "I have lots of them." The table was covered with papers, and Elena's breath caught as she looked at them. These weren't typical child's drawings of houses with triangle roofs and smiling suns. These were detailed, almost hauntingly so. Pictures of a woman with long hair standing at a window, a man sitting alone by a fire, a little girl hiding in shadows. But it was the newest drawing that made Elena's pulse quicken. A woman in a long dress standing in snow, her arms outstretched toward a house with light in the windows. The woman's face was turned upward, as if looking toward heaven, and her expression was one of hope mixed with sorrow. "That's you," Sarah said, pointing to the drawing. "I made it last week before you came. Mama told me to draw it." Elena knelt beside the child, her medical training warring with something deeper, more instinctive. "Sarah, sweetheart, when you say your mama talks to you, what do you mean exactly?" "In my dreams," Sarah said simply. "She comes and sits on my bed, and she tells me things. She said Papa blames himself for her going away, but it wasn't his fault. She said bad men sometimes do bad things, and good people get hurt, but that doesn't make the good people bad." From the kitchen came the sound of a pot clanging against the stove, followed by a muttered curse. Elena looked toward the doorway, then back at Sarah. "Your papa seems like a good man," she said carefully. "He is, but he's sad all the time now. He thinks he did something wrong the night Mama went away, but he was just sleeping real hard. I heard the bad man's voice, but Papa didn't. Papa sleeps real hard when he drinks his special medicine." Elena's blood chilled. "Bad man? Sarah, what bad man?" But before the child could answer, Jake's voice cut across the room. "Stew's ready. Sarah, wash your hands." As they sat around the rough-hewn dining table, Elena found herself studying Jake Morrison more carefully. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe 35, with lines around his eyes that spoke more of outdoor work than age. His hands were scarred from ranch work, and he wore his dark hair longer than was fashionable, as if he couldn't be bothered with such things. But it was his eyes that held her attention, storm gray, haunted, and carefully guarded. They were the eyes of a man carrying a weight too heavy for one person to bear. "This is delicious," Elena said, tasting the beef stew. "You're a good cook." "Mary taught me," he said, then immediately looked like he regretted the words. "My wife. She said a man should know how to feed himself and his family." "She was smart," Elena said gently. "Yeah, she was." His voice was rough with old grief. "Too smart to just disappear without a word." Sarah looked up from her bowl. "She didn't disappear, Papa. The bad man took her away. I told you." Jake's fork clattered against his bowl. "Sarah, we've talked about this. You were having nightmares. Sometimes our minds make up stories to help us deal with things we don't understand." "I wasn't dreaming," Sarah insisted, her voice taking on a stubborn edge. "I heard him talking to Mama. He said she had to come with him or he'd hurt us. And she said she'd go, but only if he promised to leave you and me alone." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jake's face had gone white, and Elena could see his hands shaking as he set down his spoon. "Sarah, you need to stop telling stories." "It's not a story." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "The sheriff said I was too little to know what really happened, and you said I was dreaming, but I wasn't. I remember everything." Elena reached out instinctively, covering Sarah's small hand with her own. "It's all right, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups need time to hear the truth." Jake's gaze snapped to Elena, and she saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. "Miss Hayes, I appreciate your kindness to Sarah, but you don't understand the situation here." "Then help me understand," Elena said quietly, "because that little girl isn't making up stories. I've seen enough trauma to recognize it, and she's telling the truth about something." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the wind had picked up again, howling around the eaves like a living thing. Inside, 3 people sat around a table, bound together by circumstance and secrets, while the fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. Finally, Jake pushed back from the table and stood. "I need to check on the animals." He looked down at Sarah, his expression softening. "Baby girl, why don't you show Miss Hayes your room while I'm outside?" "But then it's time for bed." After he left, Sarah led Elena up the stairs to a small bedroom that was clearly a child's paradise. Dolls lined shelves, books were stacked in corners, and the walls were covered with more of Sarah's detailed drawings. But it was the window that drew Elena's attention. It faced the back of the property, toward a line of trees that were barely visible through the falling snow. Sarah climbed onto the window seat and pressed her face to the glass. "That's where the bad man's horse was tied that night," she said matter-of-factly. "Right by that big pine tree. I watched him from here while Mama talked to him down by the kitchen door." Elena's heart pounded. "Sarah, did you see the man's face?" The little girl nodded. "He had a scar on his cheek, like someone cut him with a knife, and his horse was black with a white spot on its nose. Mama cried when she went with him, but she looked back at the house and blew a kiss toward my window." "Have you told anyone else about this?" "I tried to tell Papa, but he gets upset and says I'm remembering wrong, and the sheriff said little girls sometimes mix up dreams with real things." Sarah turned away from the window, her expression far too old for her years. "But you believe me, don't you?" Elena knelt down and took the child's hands in hers. "I believe you, sweetheart, and I think your mama was very brave that night." For the first time since Elena had arrived, Sarah smiled, really smiled, bright and genuine. "I knew you'd understand. That's why God sent you to us. You're going to help Papa remember the truth, aren't you?" Before Elena could answer, the sound of boots on the porch announced Jake's return. Sarah scrambled into her nightgown with practiced speed, and Elena helped her into bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin. "Will you be here in the morning?" Sarah whispered. Elena smoothed the child's hair back from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. I'll be here." As she turned to leave, Sarah's voice stopped her at the doorway. "Miss Elena? The bad man. He's coming back." Elena's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" "In my dreams. Mama's been trying to warn us. She says he's coming back because he thinks Papa might remember what really happened that night." Downstairs, Elena found Jake standing by the fire. staring into the flames with an expression of such profound sadness that it took her breath away. He'd removed his outer shirt, and she could see the way his shoulders carried tension, like a yoke. "She told you about that night, didn't she?" he said without turning around. "Jake, if what she's saying is true, then I'm not the man who let his wife disappear because he was too drunk to protect her. I'm the man who let her be murdered because he was too drunk to wake up." His voice was hollow, defeated. "Either way, Mary's dead because of me." Elena stepped closer, close enough to smell the scent of wood smoke and winter air that clung to his clothes. "That's not true, and you know it. If Sarah's right, your wife sacrificed herself to protect you and your daughter. Don't dishonor that sacrifice by blaming yourself for her courage." Jake turned then, and Elena saw the tears he'd been fighting. "I loved her," he whispered. "I loved her so much, and I failed her when she needed me most." "You didn't fail her, Jake, and you haven't failed Sarah." Elena reached out, her hand hovering near his arm. "But that little girl needs her father to be strong enough to hear the truth, even when it hurts." For a moment they stood in silence, the fire crackling between them and something else, something dangerous and electric, sparking in the space between their bodies. Then Jake stepped back, breaking the spell. "The storm's not letting up. You'll have to stay the night. I'll sleep down here by the fire. You can take the guest room." As Elena made her way upstairs, she heard Jake adding another log to the fire, settling into his chair with a creak of leather. But she also heard something else, the soft sound of a man crying for the first time in 3 years. Because somewhere in the darkness outside Morrison Ranch, a man with a scarred face was indeed riding through the storm, coming back to finish what he'd started the night he killed Mary Morrison. And this time, he wouldn't leave any witnesses behind. Elena woke to the sound of silence. The blizzard had passed sometime during the night, leaving behind a world wrapped in pristine white. Through the guest room window, she could see the sun painting the snow in shades of gold and rose, and the mountains in the distance stood like sentinels against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. But it was the other sounds that had woken her, the gentle clatter of pans from the kitchen below, the soft murmur of voices, and something else, something that made her sit up straighter in the narrow bed. Laughter, a child's laughter, bright and musical. Elena dressed quickly in her spare dress, plain brown wool, practical and warm, and made her way downstairs. The sight that greeted her in the kitchen made her stop in the doorway. Jake stood at the stove, his dark hair tousled from sleep, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He was flipping pancakes with the concentrated attention of a man who took his domestic duties seriously. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs and chattering away like a little magpie. And then the rabbit said to the fox, "You can't catch me because I'm too clever." Sarah giggled. But the fox said, "We'll see about that. Isn't that funny, Papa?" "Hilarious," Jake said, but Elena could hear the smile in his voice. "Now, do you want butter on these pancakes or just syrup?" "Both. And can Miss Elena have some too? She's probably real hungry after traveling so far in the storm." Jake turned and Elena saw that he'd noticed her standing there. His face was softer this morning, less guarded, though she could still see the shadows under his eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. "Good morning," he said. "I hope we didn't wake you." "Not at all. It smells wonderful in here." Elena stepped into the kitchen and immediately felt the strange sensation of belonging, as if she'd stood in this exact spot 1,000 times before, watching this man cook breakfast while his daughter chattered happily nearby. "Papa makes the best pancakes in Wyoming territory," Sarah announced proudly. "Mama taught him the recipe before she went to heaven. She said a man who can't feed his family isn't much of a man at all." Elena caught the slight tightening around Jake's eyes at the mention of his wife, but he kept cooking without comment. Sarah, however, seemed oblivious to any awkwardness. "Mama used to sit right where you're sitting," Sarah told Elena as she pulled out a chair. "She'd drink her coffee and read from her book of poems while Papa cooked. She had the prettiest voice when she read poems, like singing, but with words instead of music." Jake set a plate of golden pancakes in front of Elena, his hand brushing hers briefly as he handed her the syrup. "Sarah, maybe Miss Elena doesn't want to hear about I don't mind, Elena said gently. Your mama sounds like she was a wonderful woman, Sarah. She was, Sarah's face lit up. She had hair like sunshine and could braid it in patterns that looked like flowers. And she could play the piano so pretty that sometimes birds would come sit on the windowsill to listen. Papa used to dance with her in the evenings, right there by the fireplace. Jake had gone very still, spatula frozen halfway to the griddle. Elena saw his jaw work silently before he turned back to the stove. That's a beautiful memory, sweetheart, Elena said carefully. It sounds like your parents loved each other very much. They did. Mama said Papa was the best man in all the world, and that someday I'd find a man just like him. But Papa doesn't dance anymore. Sarah's voice grew wistful. I asked him to dance with me last Christmas, but he said he forgot how. The silence that followed was heavy with grief and memory. Elena found herself studying Jake's profile as he stood at the stove, the strong line of his jaw, the way his shoulders had tensed at Sarah's innocent words. She could almost see the weight of his sorrow pressing down on him like a physical thing. Well, Elena said brightly, determined to lift the mood, maybe we could ask your papa to remember how to dance. I bet he could teach us both a few steps. Jake turned sharply, his gray eyes meeting hers with something that might have been panic. I don't think— Oh, please, Papa. Sarah bounced in her chair, syrup forgotten. Miss Elena could help you remember. She looks like she knows how to dance. Look at how graceful she moves. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm not sure I'm the best teacher. I learned to dance in Kansas City, but that was a long time ago. Please. Sarah's blue eyes were impossible to resist. Just once? For me? Jake set down the spatula with deliberate care and turned to face them both. His expression was carefully neutral, but Elena could see the storm brewing behind his eyes. Sarah, Miss Elena isn't staying. Once the road's clear, I'm taking her to town so she can catch the next stage back east. The words hit Elena like cold water, though she wasn't sure why. Of course she wasn't staying. She had no reason to stay, no place here. This wasn't her family, her home, her life. She was just a woman who'd been deceived by a mail fraud, nothing more. So why did the thought of leaving make her chest tighten with something that felt suspiciously like loss? Sarah's face fell. But Papa, she just got here. And it's Christmas in 2 weeks. We can't let her spend Christmas alone on a stagecoach. Sarah. Besides, the little girl continued with the logic only children possessed, the roads won't be clear for days yet. Look outside. There must be 3 feet of snow out there. Elena glanced through the window and had to admit Sarah was right. The drifts were enormous, and she could see where the wind had carved the snow into fantastic shapes that would make travel treacherous, if not impossible. She has a point, Elena said quietly. I wouldn't want to impose, but it might be safer to wait a few more days. Jake ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Elena was beginning to recognize as a sign of his internal struggle. Fine, a few more days. But then you need to get back to your life, Miss Elena. Whatever that looks like. After breakfast, while Jake went out to tend the animals, Elena found herself alone in the house with Sarah and the ghosts of Mary Morrison. They were everywhere, those gentle reminders of the woman who'd made this house a home. A half-finished sampler on the mantelpiece. The words, "Bless this house," embroidered in delicate stitches. A collection of pressed flowers between the pages of books. A shawl draped over the back of a rocking chair, as if its owner had just stepped away for a moment. But it was the piano that drew Elena like a magnet. She found Sarah sitting on the bench, her small fingers picking out a hesitant melody on the yellowed keys. The child looked up as Elena approached. Mama was teaching me this song before she went away, Sarah said, but I can't remember all the notes. May I? Elena gestured to the bench, and Sarah scooted over to make room. Elena hadn't played piano in years, not since before the war, when she lived at home with her parents, and music had been a luxury she could afford. But as her fingers found the keys, muscle memory took over. The melody that emerged was hauntingly beautiful, a simple folk tune that spoke of love and loss and hope deferred. Sarah hummed along, her sweet voice weaving through the notes like golden thread. That's it! Sarah clapped her hands together. That's exactly how Mama played it. How did you know? Elena's hands stilled on the keys. I'm not sure. It just felt familiar somehow. It's because you belong here, Sarah said with absolute certainty. Mama always said this house would know its family when they came home. The piano wouldn't play pretty for just anybody. From the doorway came a soft intake of breath. Elena turned to see Jake standing there, snow still clinging to his coat, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. She used to play that song, he said hoarsely, every evening while I worked on the books. Mary said it reminded her of her mother. Elena stood quickly, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to presume. No. Jake's voice was rough, but not angry. No, it's good to hear music in this house again. The afternoon passed in a strange sort of domestic peace. Elena helped Sarah with her letters while Jake worked on ranch business. They shared a simple lunch of bread and soup, and Elena found herself marveling at how natural it felt, as if she'd always been part of this routine, this life. But it was when Sarah went upstairs for her nap that Elena made the discovery that changed everything. She'd been looking for extra blankets in the hall closet when her hand brushed against something tucked behind the linens. A bundle of papers tied with a blue ribbon, the same blue as Sarah's eyes, the same blue Mary Morrison had favored. Elena hesitated for only a moment before pulling out the bundle. The papers were covered in Mary's delicate handwriting, and as Elena read, her blood turned to ice. He's been watching the house again. I saw him by the tree line this morning, just sitting on that black horse of his. Jake doesn't believe me when I tell him, but I know what I saw. The same man who worked here last summer, the one Jake had to dismiss for stealing. Sarah woke up crying again last night. She said the bad man was in her dreams and that he was coming to take me away. I told her it was just a nightmare, but what if it isn't? What if she's seeing something I can't? I've hidden the jewelry Jake gave me for our anniversary in the hollow of the old oak tree. If something happens to me, I want Sarah to have it when she's grown. I've also written a letter to my sister in Denver, telling her everything I know about Reed Dalton. If I disappear, she'll know where to start looking for answers. The final entry was dated 3 days before Mary's disappearance. He came to the kitchen door tonight while Jake was in town, said he wanted his job back, that he'd learned his lesson about taking things that didn't belong to him. When I told him Jake would never rehire a thief, he smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. He said some things belonged to him, whether other people knew it or not, and that someday he'd come back to collect what was his. I'm scared, but I can't tell Jake. He has enough to worry about with the ranch struggling. I'll handle this myself somehow. Elena's hands were shaking as she retied the ribbon around the papers. Reed Dalton, the man with the scarred face that Sarah remembered. The man who'd taken Mary Morrison away in the night. The man who, according to Sarah's dreams, was coming back. What are you doing? Elena spun around to find Jake standing at the bottom of the stairs, his face hard with suspicion. I was looking for blankets, Elena said, her voice unsteadier than she'd intended. I found these papers and Those are private. Jake climbed the stairs 2 at a time, his hand extended. Give them to me. Jake, you need to read these. Your wife wrote about a man named Reed Dalton, and I said, give them to me. His voice was cold, dangerous. You have no right to go through my wife's things. Elena reluctantly handed over the bundle, but she couldn't let it go. She was scared of him, Jake. She knew he was watching the house, and she tried to protect herself and Sarah. Stop. Jake's face had gone white. Just stop. I've heard enough theories about what happened to Mary. The sheriff investigated. The case is closed. But what if it isn't? What if Sarah really did see? Sarah was 3 years old. Jake's voice rose, and Elena heard Sarah stirring in her room upstairs. She was traumatized and confused, and she's been having nightmares ever since. I won't let you fill her head with more fantasies about mysterious villains and murdered mothers. Elena stepped closer, lowering her voice. What if they're not fantasies? What if your wife died trying to protect you and Sarah from a man who's still out there? Jake stared at her for a long moment, the papers clutched in his white-knuckled hands. You don't understand, he said finally. I've lived with the guilt of that night for 3 years. I've wondered every single day if I could have saved her, if I'd been sober, if I'd been paying attention. Do you have any idea what it would mean if... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. If you weren't responsible for her death, Elena said gently, if there really was nothing you could have done. Jake's jaw worked silently, and Elena saw the war being fought behind his eyes. Between hope and despair, between the terrible certainty of guilt and the terrifying possibility of innocence. Finally, he turned and walked toward his bedroom, the papers still in his hands. You should get some rest, he said without looking back. Tomorrow I'll see about getting you to town, roads or no roads. Elena watched him disappear into his room, and a moment later she heard the soft sound of a door closing, not slamming, but closing with the finality of a man shutting out the world. Upstairs, Sarah called out sleepily, Miss Elena? Is everything all right? Everything's fine, sweetheart, Elena called back, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Go back to sleep. But as Elena stood in the hallway, surrounded by the lingering traces of Mary Morrison's life, she knew that nothing was fine, because somewhere in the darkness beyond the ranch, a killer was coming home to finish what he'd started. And the drawings Sarah had been making in secret, the ones Elena hadn't seen yet, would reveal exactly when Reed Dalton planned to strike again. Elena couldn't sleep. The guest room felt smaller in the darkness, shadows creeping across the walls like living things. Every creak of the house settling, every whisper of wind through the eaves, made her heart race. She couldn't stop thinking about Mary's hidden papers, about the fear that had lived in this house for weeks before that terrible night. Finally, she gave up on sleep and wrapped herself in the quilt, padding silently to the window. The moon was full, casting the snow-covered landscape in silver light. It was beautiful, pristine, and utterly deceptive, because somewhere out there, evil was planning its return. A movement caught her eye near the tree line. Elena pressed her face to the cold glass, squinting through the moonlight. For a moment she thought she saw a dark shape against the snow. Too large to be an animal, too still to be natural. But when she blinked and looked again, there was nothing. Her imagination, surely. The power of suggestion after reading Mary's terrified words. But as she turned away from the window, she heard it, the soft creak of floorboards somewhere in the house below. Elena's nursing instincts took over, the same hyper-awareness that had kept her alive in field hospitals where death walked the rows of cots. She moved to her door and opened it carefully, listening. Another creak, then the soft whisper of paper being unfolded. Jake was still awake, reading Mary's papers. Elena hesitated at the top of the stairs, torn between respect for his privacy and the growing certainty that time was running out for all of them. The decision was made for her when she heard a sound that chilled her blood. A man's broken sob, quickly muffled but unmistakable. She found him in the kitchen, sitting at the rough wooden table with Mary's papers spread before him. The lamp cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting the tracks of tears he wasn't bothering to hide. His hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his shirt hung open at the collar. Jake? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. He looked up, his gray eyes raw with pain, and something else. Hope, fragile and terrifying. She knew, he said hoarsely. She knew he was coming for her, and she didn't tell me. Why didn't she tell me? Elena moved closer, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. Maybe she was trying to protect you. Maybe she thought she could handle it alone. She shouldn't have had to handle it alone. Jake's fist clenched around one of the papers. I was her husband. It was my job to protect her, and I failed because I was too drunk to even know she was in danger. You didn't fail her, Jake. You couldn't have known. But Sarah knew. He looked up at Elena, his face a mask of anguish. A 3-year-old child saw what I was too blind to see. She tried to tell me, and I thought they were nightmares. Elena pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. In the lamplight, she could see Mary's delicate handwriting more clearly now, pages and pages of growing fear, of a woman who felt trapped and alone with her terror. Tell me about Reed Dalton, Elena said gently. Jake was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak, his voice flat and emotionless. I hired him last summer when one of my regular hands broke his leg. He was a hard worker, I'll give him that. Strong, reliable, knew his way around horses and cattle. But there was something, Jake paused, searching for words. Something wrong with the way he looked at Mary, like she was something he owned but had temporarily misplaced. What did you do about it? At first, nothing. Mary never complained, never said he made her uncomfortable. But then things started disappearing from the house. Small things. A locket that belonged to Mary's mother, a silver hairbrush I'd given her for our anniversary. And Sarah began having nightmares. Elena leaned forward. What kind of nightmares? She'd wake up screaming about a shadow man who watched her sleep. Said he wanted to take Mom away to a dark place. Jake's voice cracked. The doctor said it was normal for children her age to have night terrors, but they got worse every week Reed worked here. So you fired him? I caught him in our bedroom one afternoon when he thought we were all in town. He was going through Mary's jewelry box. When I confronted him, he claimed he was looking for something he'd dropped while fixing the window latch. But there was nothing wrong with that window, and Mary's jewelry was scattered all over the bed like he'd been... Jake stopped, his face darkening with remembered rage. Like he'd been fondling her things. Elena finished quietly. Jake nodded. I told him to pack up and get off my land. He went quiet then, real quiet. Just stared at me with these cold eyes and said, some things are worth waiting for, Morrison. Some things are worth coming back for. I should have known then. I should have realized he was threatening her. Elena studied the papers spread across the table, her mind working through the timeline. Mary's last entry was 3 days before she disappeared. Do you remember anything unusual about that time? I was in town for 3 days, selling cattle and buying supplies for winter. Mary begged me not to go, said she had a bad feeling, but I thought it was just... He trailed off, guilt written across every line of his face. Just what? Just woman's nerves. God help me, I thought she was being dramatic. Jake's voice broke completely then. The night I came home, I was tired, frustrated because the cattle prices were lower than expected. I drank too much whiskey and passed out by the fire. When I woke up the next morning, there was blood on my shirt, blood on the kitchen floor, and Mary was gone. Elena's medical training kicked in, analyzing the facts with clinical detachment. How much blood? Jake looked surprised by the question. Enough to soak through my shirt front. The sheriff said it looked like someone had bled directly onto me. But you had no wounds. None. Not a scratch. Elena's pulse quickened. Jake, what if the blood wasn't from violence? What if Mary cut herself deliberately to make it look like you'd hurt her? What do you mean? Elena stood up, pacing to the window where she'd seen the shadow earlier. Think about it. Reed Dalton comes to the house, probably threatens to hurt you and Sarah if Mary doesn't come with him. She's terrified but trapped. So she does the only thing she can think of. She makes it look like you attacked her, then disappears. That way, if anyone comes looking for her, they'll assume she ran away from an abusive husband rather than searching for a killer. Jake stared at her, hope and horror warring in his expression. You think she cut herself? On purpose? I think she loved you and Sarah enough to sacrifice everything, including her own reputation, to protect you. Elena turned back to face him. The question is, where would Reed Dalton have taken her? Before Jake could answer, a soft sound from upstairs made them both freeze. Footsteps. Small, hesitant footsteps. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, her white nightgown making her look like a ghost in the lamplight. Her face was pale, her blue eyes wide with fear. Papa, she whispered, the bad man is coming back. I saw him in my dream again. He's riding a black horse, and he's bringing rope and a shovel. Elena felt ice form in her veins. Sarah, when did you have this dream? Just now. Mama was there too. She was crying and trying to warn us, but her voice was all echoey, like she was calling from far away. Sarah ran to Jake, climbing onto his lap like she used to when she was smaller. She said to tell you she's sorry about the blood, Papa. She said she had to make it look real so the bad man would believe you hurt her instead of loving her. Jake's arms tightened around his daughter, and Elena saw the exact moment when the truth hit him fully. Not the guilt he'd carried for 3 years, but the terrible knowledge that his wife had died protecting them, and that her killer was still out there. How long do we have? Elena asked Sarah gently. In your dream, when is he coming? Tomorrow night, Sarah whispered. when the moon goes behind the big cloud and everything gets dark. Elena looked out the window at the clear night sky, then back at Jake. We need help. Is there a sheriff in town? Someone who would believe us? Jake shook his head grimly. Sheriff Brennan is Reed's cousin. He's the one who declared the case closed and convinced everyone Mary ran off with another man. He's not going to reopen an investigation based on a child's dreams and a dead woman's diary. Then we handle this ourselves, Elena said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. You know this land better than anyone. Where would be the best place to make a stand? Elena, you don't understand what you're saying. This isn't some game. Reed Dalton is a killer, and if he's coming back, it's to finish what he started. I won't let you get caught up in this. Elena moved closer, her nursing instincts flaring to life. Jake, I've seen men die in ways that would give you nightmares. I've held intestines inside torn bodies with my bare hands and brought soldiers back from the edge of death through sheer stubbornness. Don't you dare tell me I can't handle one twisted man with delusions of ownership? Something flickered in Jake's eyes. Surprise, respect, maybe even attraction. You're not what I expected from a mail-order bride, he said quietly. I was never really a mail-order bride, Elena replied. I was a woman running from one kind of death who stumbled into another kind of life. And now I'm a woman who won't let Reed Dalton destroy what's left of this family. Sarah looked up at both of them with eyes too old for her years. Are you going to stay and fight for us, Miss Elena? Elena knelt down beside Jake's chair, putting herself at eye level with the child. Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to stay and fight. Even after we catch the bad man? Even after everything's safe again? Elena's throat tightened as she looked at Sarah's hopeful face, then up at Jake's cautious expression. We'll see, sweetheart. One battle at a time. But as she spoke the words, Elena realized with crystal clarity that she didn't want to leave. Not ever. Somewhere in the space between Sarah's first whispered words and Jake's broken sobs over his wife's papers, this had stopped being about helping strangers and started being about protecting her family. Her family. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it filled her with a fierce determination she hadn't felt since the war. Jake seemed to sense the change in her. Elena, there's something else you should know. Something I haven't told you about that night. Elena waited, her heart hammering. When I woke up with Mary's blood on my shirt, I wasn't alone in the house. There were muddy boot prints in the kitchen, too big to be Mary's, too small to be mine. And there was something else. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. A note tucked into my shirt pocket. It said, "She screamed your name at the end. Next time, it'll be the little girl." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Where's the note now? I burned it. I was drunk, confused, covered in blood. I thought I'd written it myself in some kind of blackout rage. I thought... His voice broke again. I thought I'd killed her and blocked it out. Sarah squirmed in her father's arms, pressing her small hand against his cheek. Papa, you could never hurt anybody. Your hands are for taking care of people, not hurting them. Elena stood abruptly, her mind racing. Jake, we need to search the house. If Reed Dalton is coming back, he might have left other messages, other clues about what he's planning. Elena, no, listen to me. I found Mary's papers by accident, which means there might be other things hidden, other evidence. Elena was already moving toward the stairs. Sarah, sweetheart, can you show me all the places where your mama used to hide things? All her secret spots? Sarah nodded eagerly, slipping down from Jake's lap. She had lots of hiding places. She said a smart woman always keeps some things secret, even from the people she loves most. As they climbed the stairs together, Jake reluctantly following, Elena felt the house itself watching them, waiting. The ghosts in the walls weren't just memories anymore. They were warnings. And in the morning, when Elena searched the hollow of the old oak tree that Mary had mentioned in her papers, she would find more than just hidden jewelry. She would find proof that Reed Dalton's obsession with Mary Morrison had run deeper and more deadly than anyone imagined, and that his return was about more than finishing old business. It was about claiming what he believed had always belonged to him, not just Mary's body, but her daughter's future. Dawn broke, gray and heavy, snow falling in thick curtains that muffled all sound. Elena woke to Jake moving downstairs, the scrape of furniture, the metallic click of rifles. The house felt electric with coming violence. She found him repositioning the kitchen table against the front window, Winchester propped nearby. His face was granite, but his hands trembled slightly as he worked. "Any sign of him?" Elena asked. "Fresh tracks by the barn. He's watching, waiting." Jake didn't look up. "I want you and Sarah upstairs when this happens." "We talked about this." "Elena." His gray eyes met hers, fierce and desperate. "If something happens to me, take Sarah and run. Get to Mrs. Henderson in town." Elena nodded, knowing it was a lie. There would be no running. The morning crawled. Jake checked the perimeter twice, returning with the same report. Tracks in the snow, always just beyond rifle range. Elena gathered medical supplies, checked windows, tried to keep busy. Sarah woke subdued, clinging to Elena's skirt. She barely touched her breakfast, blue eyes constantly drifting to the windows. "He's getting closer," Sarah whispered. "I can feel him thinking about us, about rope and shovels and making Papa watch." Jake's coffee cup rattled against the table. "Sarah, when the bad man comes, you hide in your room. No matter what you hear, don't come out." "Will you kill him, Papa?" The question hung in the frigid air. Jake struggled with how to answer his 5-year-old. "I'll do whatever I have to do," he said finally. "Good. He made Mama cry." As afternoon faded, the temperature dropped and snow thickened. Elena helped Jake create defensive positions, moving furniture, checking ammunition. The house felt like a fortress preparing for siege. "There's something else," Elena said, pulling a bundle of letters from her apron. "I found these in the oak tree this morning." Jake's hands shook as he read. The first was Mary's letter about Reed's character. The second made his face go white. Reed's letter to Mary, filled with delusional promises and veiled threats. "He actually believed she wanted him," Jake breathed. "There are 6 more, each one worse. In the last, he promises to return after you've grieved properly and take Sarah as his own." Jake's face went murderous. "Over my dead body." "That's his plan." The attack came at dusk, exactly as Sarah predicted. Elena spotted him first, a tall figure moving through the snow with predatory confidence. The pale scar down his cheek was visible even in the failing light. "Back window," she whispered. Jake joined her, rifle ready. Reed Dalton approached with deliberate slowness, making no attempt at stealth. He wanted them afraid. He stopped beyond the lamplight and called out, "Morrison, time to finish our conversation." Jake said nothing. "I have something of yours." Reed held up a glinting object, a woman's wedding ring. "She asked me to return this, right before she died." Elena felt Jake tremble beside her. "She screamed your name, Morrison. Kept calling for you to save her. But you were drunk, weren't you?" "Don't listen," Elena whispered. "He's trying to provoke you." But Jake was already moving toward the door, face deadly with intent. The front window exploded as Reed's boot connected with glass. He rolled through with practiced ease, guns in both hands, scarred face split by a nightmare smile. "Surprise!" Jake spun with his rifle, but Reed fired first. Jake stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "Jake!" Elena lunged forward. "Stay there, sweetheart." Reed swung a gun toward her. "First, we collect the little princess upstairs." "You stay away from her." Jake struggled upright, rifle in his good hand. Reed laughed like breaking glass. "You're in no position for demands. I could have killed you, but where's the fun? I want you to watch me take everything you love. Mary never belonged to you." "She did, from the moment I saw her in that blue dress. She was mine and you knew it. That's why you fired me, poisoned her against me." Reed's voice rose, shrill with grievance. "But I'm patient. I waited 3 years. Now comes the next part." Elena calculated distances, looking for weakness. Reed was focused on Jake, drunk on his twisted story. "What next part?" Jake asked, clearly buying time. "I take the girl, raise her as mine, the way Mary wanted. She'll learn to love me like her mother should have." Reed's smile widened. "And you die knowing you failed them both." Elena saw her chance. While Reed monologued, she'd moved closer to the kitchen rifle mounted above the door. She lunged for it just as Reed noticed. His shot splintered wood where her head had been. Elena rolled, came up with the rifle aimed at his chest. "Drop your weapons." Reed stared in surprise, then laughed. "A woman? You're hiding behind a woman, Morrison?" "I'm not hiding behind anyone," Jake said, raising his rifle despite the blood. "Aren't you? Tell me, did you check on your daughter recently?" Elena's blood froze. "Sarah, are you all right?" Silence. "Sarah!" Jake's voice cracked. Nothing. Then faintly, what might have been muffled crying. "I didn't come alone," Reed said conversationally. "My partner's upstairs with the girl. One wrong move, and she starts screaming. Permanently." "You're lying." "Drop that rifle and you can go check. Keep pointing it at me," and he starts cutting off fingers. The rifle trembled in Elena's hands. Jake bleeding, Sarah upstairs with another monster. Reed between them and salvation. "Elena," Jake said quietly, "don't trust him. Whatever happens." Reed's second gun cracked. Jake crumpled, blood spreading across his chest. "Jake!" Elena's scream tore her throat as she swung toward Reed, but he dove behind the overturned table. From upstairs, "Miss Elena! Help me!" Elena faced an impossible choice. Finish Reed but leave Sarah with his partner, or save Sarah but let Reed escape to kill Jake. Her nursing training decided. Save who you can save. Elena dropped the rifle and ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. Behind her, Reed's triumphant laughter echoed. Sarah's door was closed, but Elena heard voices. A man's growl, Sarah's whimpers. She threw herself against the door with all her weight. It burst inward. A bearded stranger held Sarah by the hair, knife at her throat. Sarah's face was streaked with tears, but her eyes blazed defiance. "Let her go," Elena said, deadly calm. The man grinned, showing broken teeth. "Or what?" Elena smiled, and something in that smile made him step back. "I'm going to kill you." She moved with surgical precision, grabbing the pewter candlestick from Sarah's dresser. The man saw it coming but couldn't duck while holding Sarah. The candlestick connected with his temple like a melon dropping. He released Sarah, staggered. Elena hit him again, and again, until he collapsed and lay still. "Miss Elena!" Sarah threw herself into Elena's arms. "You're safe now. We need to help Papa." Downstairs, Reed was gone. Jake lay motionless by the table, blood pooling beneath him. Elena checked his pulse, weak but steady, high chest wound, missed the heart but damaged his lung. "Papa!" Sarah tried to run to him. "Sarah, get me clean towels from the kitchen. As many as you can carry." Sarah ran off. Elena pressed her hands against the worst bleeding, trying to stabilize him. Jake's eyes fluttered open. He tried to speak. "Don't talk. Save your strength." "Reed." Barely a whisper. "Gone, but he'll be back." "No time." Jake's hand found hers, grip surprisingly strong. "He's not done. Won't stop until..." "Until what?" Jake's eyes closed. For a terrifying moment, Elena thought she'd lost him. Then he whispered, "Until he has her." Sarah. That's what this was always about. Elena's blood chilled as Reed's full plan became clear. Mary's murder hadn't been the end. It was the beginning. 3 years of planning to eliminate Jake and claim Sarah. "He won't get her," Elena promised, pressing against his wounds. "I swear, Jake, he'll never touch her." But even as she spoke, Elena heard the sound that turned her blood to ice, the distant thunder of hoofbeats getting closer. Reed Dalton was coming back to finish what he'd started, and this time, he wasn't coming alone. 3 days passed in a haze of blood and fever dreams. Elena barely left Jake's side, changing bandages, forcing broth between his lips, fighting to keep him alive through sheer stubborn will. The bullet had missed his heart by inches, but the lung damage was severe. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling out Mary's name, sometimes Sarah's, sometimes hers. Sarah had become a ghost of herself, barely speaking, jumping at every sound. She helped Elena with quiet efficiency, bringing clean water, holding bandages, singing soft lullabies to her unconscious father. But her blue eyes held a haunted quality that broke Elena's heart. "Will Papa die?" Sarah asked on the 3rd morning, her small hand resting on Jake's fevered forehead. "No, sweetheart. Your Papa is the strongest man I know. He's going to be fine." Elena prayed she wasn't lying. The town doctor had finally made it through the snow-blocked roads, confirming what Elena already knew. Jake would live. But it would be weeks before he could even sit up, months before he could work the ranch again. They were vulnerable, isolated, and Reed Dalton was still out there somewhere. The sheriff's forming a posse, Dr. Whitman had told Elena privately. Reed's partner didn't make it. You hit him pretty hard with that candlestick, but Reed himself vanished like smoke. Could be anywhere by now. Elena nodded, but she knew better. Reed wasn't gone. He was waiting, watching, planning his next move. A man that obsessed didn't simply give up. As Jake began to recover, growing stronger each day but still bedridden, Elena found herself facing a different kind of battle. One fought in the quiet moments between caring for him, in the gentle touches as she changed his bandages, in the way his gray eyes followed her around the room. "You saved my life," he said one evening, his voice still hoarse but steady. "You and Sarah both. You would have done the same for us. But I couldn't. I failed you both, just like I failed Mary." His hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining with her smooth ones. "Elena, I need to tell you something." She waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. "That night when I found you in the blizzard, when Sarah spoke her first words in 3 years, I knew." His voice was barely a whisper. "I knew you weren't just some lost bride who'd found the wrong ranch. You were meant to be here, with us." Elena's throat tightened. "Jake, let me finish." His grip on her hand tightened. "I've been dead inside for 3 years, going through the motions of living but not really alive. Then you walked into our lives and everything changed. Sarah talks again. She laughs. She draws pictures of happy families instead of nightmares." Tears burned Elena's eyes. "She's an amazing little girl. She thinks you're her mother now. Did you know that? She told Dr. Whitman that her real mama sent you from heaven to take care of us." Jake's voice cracked. "Elena, I'm falling in love with you. I think I already have." The words should have filled her with joy. Instead, they cut like knives. Elena pulled her hand away, turning toward the window, where snow was beginning to fall again. "You don't know what you're saying. You're grateful, that's all. I helped save your life and Sarah's. It's natural to confuse gratitude with—" "Don't." Jake's voice was sharp despite his weakness. "Don't dismiss what I feel. I'm not confused, Elena. I'm not some lovesick boy who can't tell the difference between gratitude and love." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, struggling with words that felt like glass in her throat. "Jake, there are things about me you don't understand. Things that would change how you feel. Try me." She turned back to face him, and the hope in his eyes nearly broke her resolve. But he deserved the truth, even if it destroyed everything between them. "I can't give you children, Jake. I can't give you the family you deserve." Her voice was barely audible. "The injury I sustained during the war, it left me barren. I'll never be able to carry your child or give Sarah brothers and sisters." Jake stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her amazement, he smiled. "Is that what you're worried about?" "Jake, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand." He struggled to sit up despite her protests, his gray eyes blazing with an intensity that took her breath away. "Elena, I already have a daughter. Sarah needs a mother, not more siblings. She needs someone who will love her and protect her and help her heal from all the pain she's carried." "But what about what you need, what you want?" "What I want," Jake said firmly, "is you. Just you. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to watch you braid Sarah's hair and teach her to be strong and kind like you are. I want to grow old with you, Elena Hayes, and I don't give a damn if we never have another child." Elena felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "Jake, marry me," he said simply. "Not because you're a mail-order bride who ended up at the wrong ranch. Not because we're grateful to each other or because Sarah needs a mother. Marry me because you love me too. Because this is where you belong." Before Elena could answer, Sarah's voice drifted from the doorway. "Are you asking Miss Elena to be my mama for real?" They both turned to see the little girl standing in the doorway, clutching her rag doll, blue eyes bright with hope and something that might have been fear. How long have you been standing there, sweetheart? Elena asked gently. Long enough. Sarah stepped into the room, her chin lifted with determination that was heartbreakingly familiar. Miss Elena, Papa's right. You do belong here with us. I can feel it, just like I could feel the bad man coming. Sarah, my mama Mary sent you to us, Sarah continued with absolute certainty. I know because I saw her in my dreams last night. She was smiling, and she said to tell you, thank you for taking such good care of her family. She said she's not sad anymore because she knows we'll be happy. Elena's vision blurred with tears. Oh, sweetheart, so will you marry Papa? Will you be my real mama? Sarah climbed onto the bed, settling herself between Elena and Jake with the confidence of a child who knew she was loved. Please, I promise I'll be good. I won't have any more scary dreams, and I'll help with the cooking and everything. Elena looked down at this precious child who had somehow worked her way into the deepest chambers of her heart, then at Jake, whose love shone in his eyes like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She began, then stopped. Because suddenly, with brilliant clarity, she realized what she was about to do. She was about to run. Again. Just like she'd run from Kansas City when the memories of the war became too much to bear. Just like she'd considered running from the mail-order marriage when it seemed too good to be true. She was about to destroy the best thing that had ever happened to her because she was afraid. Afraid of not being enough, afraid of being too damaged, afraid of being loved for exactly who she was. I need some air, Elena said abruptly, standing so quickly that Sarah nearly tumbled off the bed. I need to think. She fled the room before either of them could protest, grabbing her coat and boots from the kitchen. Outside, the late afternoon air was sharp and clean, snow crunching under her feet as she walked toward the barn. What was wrong with her? She had everything she'd ever dreamed of right there in that house. A man who loved her completely, a child who needed her, a home where she belonged. So why was she standing in the snow, contemplating how quickly she could pack and catch the next stage out of town? Because you're a coward, a voice in her head whispered. Because you'd rather run away than risk being hurt again? Elena sank down onto a hay bale in the barn, burying her face in her hands. The truth was, she was terrified. Not of Reed Dalton or his threats, but of this overwhelming love that had taken root in her heart. She'd spent so many years believing she was broken, incomplete, that she didn't know how to accept that someone might love her anyway. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't hear the soft footsteps until it was too late. Miss Elena? Elena looked up to find Sarah standing in the barn doorway, wrapped in her little blue coat, snowflakes clinging to her blonde hair. Sweetheart, what are you doing out here? You'll catch your death of cold. I followed you. Sarah stepped closer, her blue eyes solemn. You're scared, aren't you? Elena's breath caught. What makes you say that? Because you get the same look Papa had after Mama died, like you want to love somebody but you're afraid they'll go away. Sarah climbed up onto the hay bale beside Elena, snuggling close for warmth. But I won't go away, Miss Elena. Neither will Papa. We're your family now. Oh, Sarah. Elena wrapped her arms around the little girl, pressing her face into those soft blonde curls. I love you so much, sweetheart. More than I ever thought possible. Then why won't you marry Papa? Don't you love him too? I do love him. That's the problem. Sarah pulled back to look at Elena with confusion. How is love a problem? Elena struggled to find words a 5-year-old could understand. Sometimes when you love someone very much, you get scared that you're not good enough for them, that they might find someone better and not want you anymore. That's silly, Sarah said with the blunt honesty of childhood. Papa told me once that real love doesn't go away, even when people die. He said Mama Mary will always love us, even though she's in heaven. And now he loves you too. And I love you. And that means we're a real family. But what if I'm not a good enough mother? What if I don't know how to take care of you properly? Sarah giggled, a sound like silver bells in the cold air. Miss Elena, you already are taking care of me. You save me from the bad man, and you make the best pancakes, and you read me stories, and you hug me when I have scary dreams. What else does a mama do? Elena felt something break open in her chest, not breaking apart, but breaking free. All the fear and self-doubt that had held her prisoner for so many years seemed to crack and fall away like ice in spring sunshine. "You're right," she whispered, holding Sarah close. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart. So you'll marry Papa? You'll stay with us forever?" Elena pulled back to look into those trusting blue eyes, seeing her future reflected there, a future filled with love and laughter and the kind of healing she'd never thought possible. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and certain for the first time in years. "Yes, I'll marry your papa. I'll be your mama, forever and always." Sarah's squeal of delight echoed through the barn as she threw her arms around Elena's neck. "I can't wait to tell Papa. He's been so worried that you were going to leave us." "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. This is my home now. You and Papa are my family." As they walked back toward the house, hand in hand, Elena felt a peace settle over her that she'd never experienced before. The snow was still falling, beautiful and pure, covering the world in pristine white. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth and light and love waiting inside. She was almost to the porch when she saw them. Fresh boot prints in the snow, too large to be Jake's, too recent to be from days ago. Her blood turned to ice as she realized what they meant. Reed Dalton was back, and this time he'd been watching the house, listening, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Elena grabbed Sarah and ran for the house, her heart hammering with terror. Behind them, somewhere in the gathering darkness, she could swear she heard the sound of quiet laughter carried on the winter wind. The final confrontation was coming, and this time, there would be nowhere to run. Elena burst through the front door with Sarah in her arms, slamming the heavy wooden barrier behind them and throwing the bolt. Her hands shook as she set Sarah down, her mind racing with the implications of those fresh tracks in the snow. "Elena? What's wrong?" Jake's voice came from the bedroom, weak but alert. "Fresh footprints outside. He's been watching the house." Elena grabbed the Winchester from above the fireplace, checking that it was loaded. "Jake, I need you to tell me, is there anywhere Sarah can hide? Somewhere Reed wouldn't think to look?" Before Jake could answer, Sarah tugged at Elena's skirt. "The root cellar," she whispered. "Mama used to hide me there when Papa went to town, and she was scared. There's a secret door behind the flour barrels." Elena knelt down to Sarah's level, her voice gentle but urgent. "Sweetheart, I need you to go there now, and stay hidden until either Papa or I come to get you. No matter what you hear, don't come out. Do you understand?" Sarah's blue eyes were wide but determined. "What about you and Papa? We're going to make sure the bad man can't hurt anyone ever again." Elena kissed the child's forehead. "I love you, my brave girl." "I love you too, Mama." The word came so naturally, so perfectly, that Elena's heart nearly burst despite the terror of the moment. Elena helped Sarah disappear behind the flour barrels in the pantry, ensuring the hidden door was secure. Then she returned to Jake's bedside, rifle in hand. "How are you feeling? Can you sit up?" Jake struggled upright, his face pale but resolute. "Hand me my pistol from the dresser drawer. If Reed wants to finish this, he'll have to go through both of us." Elena retrieved the weapon, noting how Jake's hands were steadier than her own despite his recent injuries. 3 years of guilt and grief had just transformed into a protective fury, and despite his weakened state, Jake Morrison looked like a man ready for war. They didn't have to wait long. The attack came with the full darkness, but not in the way Elena expected. Instead of breaking down doors or shooting through windows, Reed Dalton simply knocked. 3 polite raps on the front door. Elena and Jake exchanged glances. This was wrong, all wrong. Reed was many things, but he wasn't polite. "Morrison," Reed's voice carried through the door, calm and conversational. "I know you're in there, and I know you're hurt. I've got a proposition for you." Jake motioned for Elena to stay back as he called out, "Say your piece, Dalton." "I'm tired of playing games. 3 years is a long time to carry a grudge, don't you think? So here's my offer. You give me the girl, and I'll let you and your lady friend live. Hell, I'll even throw in safe passage out of the territory." Elena's blood turned to ice, but Jake's voice remained steady. "Sarah's not for trade. Everyone's for trade, Morrison. The question is price." Reed's voice took on a mocking tone. "Tell me, how much is one little girl worth? Your life? Your woman's life? The lives of everyone in this territory who's helped you? What do you mean? Reed's laughter drifted through the door like poison. I mean Mrs. Henderson in town who's been so kind to you. Dr. Whitman who patched you up. That nice preacher who's been praying for your recovery. Awful things happen to people who get in my way, Morrison. Fires, accidents. Sometimes whole families just disappear. Elena saw Jake's face go white with rage and understanding. Reed wasn't just threatening them. He was threatening everyone who'd shown them kindness. You're bluffing, Jake said. Am I? Ask yourself this. How did I know the doctor was here 3 days ago? How did I know about your touching little proposal this afternoon? Reed's voice turned silky with malice. I've been watching, Morrison, learning everyone you care about, everyone who cares about you. Give me the girl, and they all stay safe. Refuse, and I start working my way through them one by one. Elena met Jake's eyes and saw her own desperate determination reflected there. They couldn't let Reed terrorize the entire community, but they also couldn't give him Sarah. I need time to think, Jake called out. You've got 5 minutes. Then I start with the Henderson place. Elena heard the sound of retreating footsteps, but she knew it was a trick. Reed would be out there somewhere, watching, waiting. He's not going to just wait, Elena whispered. I know. Jake's grip tightened on his pistol. Elena, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Take Sarah and go. There's a path through the woods behind the barn that leads to the main road. If you ride hard, you can reach town before No. Elena's voice was firm. I'm not leaving you to face him alone. Elena, be reasonable. I said no, Jake Morrison. Elena turned to face him fully, her brown eyes blazing with the same determination that had carried her through the war. We're a family now. Families stick together, especially when things get dangerous. Before Jake could argue further, the sound of splintering wood echoed through the house. Reed had apparently grown tired of waiting, but the sound hadn't come from the front door. It had come from the back of the house, near the kitchen. Elena raised her rifle, moving toward the sound with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to navigate battlefields. Behind her, she heard Jake struggling to get out of bed despite his injuries. The kitchen was empty, but the back door hung open, cold wind swirling snow across the floor. Elena approached cautiously, rifle ready. Too late, she realized her mistake. The broken door was a distraction. Reed's arm snaked around her throat from behind, his other hand pressing a knife to her ribs. Drop the rifle, sweetheart, or I'll open you up right here. Elena let the Winchester fall to the floor, her mind racing for options. That's better. Now let's go collect my old friend Jake and have a proper reunion. Reed forced her back toward the bedroom, using her as a human shield. Jake was standing beside the bed, pistol raised, but Elena could see the horrible calculation in his eyes. He couldn't get a clear shot without risking her life. Hello, Morrison. You're looking well for a man who should be dead. Let her go, Reed. This is between you and me. Oh, but it's so much more fun this way. Besides, I've grown fond of your lady friend. She's got spirit. Reminds me of Mary, actually. Reed's breath was hot and foul against Elena's ear. Mary had spirit too, right up until the end. You bastard. Now. Let's not say anything we might regret. Where's the little princess? I know she's here somewhere. Elena felt Jake's eyes on her, saw him notice something behind Reed that she couldn't see. His expression changed subtly. Not quite hope, but a kind of grim satisfaction. She's gone, Jake said. Sent her to town with Dr. Whitman this morning. Reed's laugh was ugly. You always were a terrible liar, Morrison. But that's all right. I'll find her soon enough. Children have a way of making noise when they're scared. That's when Elena heard it, the soft creak of floorboards somewhere behind Reed. Someone was moving through the house and Reed hadn't noticed. Elena realized with a jolt of terror who it had to be. Sarah. The brave, foolish little girl hadn't stayed hidden in the root cellar. She was trying to help. Elena had to keep Reed's attention focused forward, away from whatever Sarah was planning. Reed, listen to me. Jake's telling the truth. Sarah's not here, but I know where she is. Reed's grip on her throat tightened. Do you now? She's at Mrs. Henderson's place. I can take you there. Elena prayed Jake would understand what she was doing. buying time, creating a distraction. Interesting. And why would you do that? Because I'm not really part of this family. I'm just a woman who got sent to the wrong ranch. Elena forced her voice to sound defeated, broken. I don't want to die for people I barely know. She felt rather than saw Jake's understanding. He was playing along now, his face a mask of betrayal and hurt that would have been convincing if Elena hadn't known better. Elena, you can't. I can, and I will. Elena looked directly at Jake, hoping he could read the love and trust in her eyes despite her words. I'm sorry, Jake. I never should have stayed. Reed was clearly enjoying this turn of events. Well, trouble in paradise? That's when Sarah struck. The 5-year-old girl emerged from the shadows behind Reed like a small, determined ghost. In her hands was Jake's hunting knife, and she drove it into Reed's thigh with all the strength her little body could muster. Reed screamed, his grip on Elena loosening. Elena twisted away as Jake's pistol roared, the sound deafening in the confined space. Reed Dalton crumpled to the floor, a spreading stain of crimson across his chest. His eyes went wide with shock and something that might have been recognition, that he'd finally pushed too far, threatened the wrong family. Mary, he whispered, then went still. For a moment the three of them simply stood there, breathing hard, unable to quite believe it was over. Then Sarah burst into tears and ran to Elena, who swept her up in her arms, holding her tight while Jake struggled over to wrap his good arm around them both. It's over, Jake said, his voice hoarse with emotion. It's finally over. 2 weeks later, Elena stood at the altar of the small church in town, wearing a simple white dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her alter. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting everything in jewel tones of red and blue and gold. Jake stood beside her in his best suit, still pale from his ordeal, but steady and strong. Sarah stood between them in a new blue dress, holding both their hands, her role as the one who gave away the bride taken very seriously. The preacher's voice was warm and kind as he spoke about the mystery of love, how it could find us in the most unexpected places and transform our lives in ways we never imagined. Do you, Elena Hayes, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband in sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer, for better and for worse, until death do you part? Elena looked into Jake's gray eyes, seeing her future reflected there. Mornings filled with laughter, evenings by the fire, the quiet joy of a love that had been tested by tragedy and emerged stronger than ever. I do, she said, her voice clear and strong. And do you, Jacob Morrison, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, in sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer, for better and for worse, until death do you part? I do, Jake replied, his voice thick with emotion. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Jake's kiss was gentle but certain, a promise of all the kisses yet to come. When they broke apart, Sarah threw her arms around both their legs, squealing with delight. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers as the three of them walked back down the aisle together. Not as strangers who had stumbled into each other's lives, but as a family bound by choice, by love, and by the kind of courage that transforms broken hearts into whole ones. Outside the church, snow was beginning to fall again, soft and clean and full of promise. Elena tilted her face up to catch the flakes on her tongue, laughing as Sarah tried to do the same. Are you happy, Mrs. Morrison? Jake asked, pulling her close. Happier than I ever thought possible, Elena replied and meant it. As they rode home to Morrison Ranch, their ranch now, their home, their beginning, Elena marveled at the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. She'd come west as a lost soul seeking a new life, and found something infinitely more precious, a family that chose her, loved her, and would never let her go. Sometimes the best destinations are the ones we never planned to reach. 5 years later, Elena Morrison stood on the porch of her home, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson. The ranch had prospered under their care. New fences stretched across green pastures, healthy cattle grazed in the distance, and the sound of laughter drifted from the yard where Sarah played with the barn kittens. Sarah was 10 now, tall and strong, with her mother's blue eyes and her father's stubborn determination. She'd grown into a confident young girl who spoke of her angel Mama Mary with love and her real Mama Elena with fierce devotion. The nightmares had long since faded, replaced by dreams of horses and adventures and all the bright possibilities that lay ahead. Jake appeared beside Elena, slipping his arm around her waist in the easy, comfortable way of a man who'd found his place in the world. His gray hair was touched with silver now, and laugh lines crinkled around his eyes. Evidence of 5 years filled with joy instead of sorrow. "Thinking about anything in particular?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Elena smiled, leaning into his warmth. "Just marveling at how strange life can be. If that mail fraud hadn't happened, if I hadn't ended up at the wrong ranch, then Sarah would never have found her voice. I'd still be drowning in guilt, and Reed Dalton would still be out there hurting people." Jake's voice was soft but certain. "No, Elena, you didn't end up at the wrong ranch. You ended up exactly where you were supposed to be." From the yard, Sarah called out, "Mama, Elena! Papa, come see what Whiskers did." Elena laughed, the sound bright and free. "Coming, sweetheart." As they walked toward their daughter together, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd come west as Elena Hayes, a broken woman running from her past, carrying nothing but grief and a false promise of marriage. Now she was Elena Morrison, wife and mother, her heart full of the kind of love she'd never dared to dream possible. Sometimes the detours in life aren't mistakes. They're miracles disguised as wrong turns. The mail-order bride who'd been delivered to the wrong address had found something infinitely more precious than the marriage she'd been promised. She'd found a family that chose her, fought for her, and loved her exactly as she was. In the growing twilight, as Jake's laughter mingled with Sarah's delighted squeals, and the ranch settled into peaceful evening quiet, Elena whispered a prayer of gratitude to the universe that had conspired to bring them together. And perhaps, somewhere in the gentle Wyoming wind, Mary Morrison's spirit smiled, knowing that her family, their family, was finally, completely whole. Here at Wild West Stories, we believe that some of life's greatest gifts come wrapped in unexpected packages. Love doesn't always arrive when we expect it, in the way we planned it, or to the address we intended. Sometimes it comes in a blizzard, to the wrong ranch, carrying the wrong name, and turns out to be exactly right. Elena's journey reminds us that being wrong for someone else doesn't mean being wrong for the person who truly sees us. That broken doesn't mean beyond repair. That sometimes the family we're meant to have isn't the one we're born into, but the one we choose, and who chooses us in return. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in second chances and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds, then subscribe to Wild West Stories. Hit that bell so you never miss tales of courage, redemption, and hearts that find their way home across the vast American frontier. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with getting lost.